The American Revolution is an example of asymmetric warfare. It was the British, the most established military in the world, against the Americans, a country with new government, leaders, and military. The British had a trained military, a government that had been in place for years, a navy, more money, and many more advantages over the Americans. The Americans were the smaller side by far, and this is what makes it asymmetric war, the fact that the sides were so uneven. The Americans, because the British had so many advantages, had to use other advantages to have a chance in the war, and that is what they did. The British wanted to just get in, show supremacy, win the war, and get out fast. They thought that it would be a quick, easy war that they would quickly be able to defeat the Americans in. They had the advantages, and they intended to use all the advantages they had. However, they far underestimated the Americans. They did not know that the Americans could do what they could do, and they were in a war much longer than they thought they would be. Because of the lack of advantages that the U.S. had, they had to use a different set of tactics than the British did. They had to employ a completely different set of tactics, and they had to use every advantage they had to its fullest. They had to take advantage of the fact that they were on home field, knew the land, and that they had more cause than the British did. Because the British had more troops, the U.S. had to position the troops in strategic places in order to be able to not take as many casualties. They also had to use different tactics in order to match the British professional army. Whenever the U.S. tried to face the British and match their fighting style, they had little success. In wars such as New York and Brandywine, the U.S. tried to match the British's style, and they lost both of these battles and took massive casualties to the British. However, when they used the tactics that they had learned from the natives, such as moving around rocks and trees and firing behind objects, they had much greater success. They were able to outmatch the British because the British stood in the open rather than tried to hide while fighting. They won in battles such as Lexington and Concord and Trenton by using these type of tactics. This was a key advantage they held over the British, and when they used this advantage, they were able to win. Other advantages that the U.S. had that they took advantage of was their home field. They knew the layout of their land better than the British, and this would be able to be useful when the British Army had lots of men overwhelming the smaller U.S. Army. This was one thing that was useful for when they were losing a battle and needed to retreat. In New York, the U.S. was taking heavy casualties. They were getting beat because of the superior British Navy and their more powerful military force. The U.S. had to escape, and this was led by George Washington. He got them out of New York even though it was not an easy task, and they saved most of their army by doing this. This was because they knew the land and escape route they could take. This also demonstrates another U.S. advantage, the fact that we had good generals. With the likes of George Washington, Francis Marion, and Benedict Arnold, and many more, the U.S. had good leadership. At Yorktown, this is shown as well. The U.S. strategically cornered the British Army by good French-American communication and thus forced the British Army to surrender. This is one of the ways they knew the land as well. They knew that they could corner the British there. Those are a couple of ways they used what little advantages they had to their use. In the Battle of Bunker Hill, the Americans used their defensive strategy to their advantage. Even though they had a much smaller army than the British, they were able to take the high ground and take much less casualties than the British did because they were on their home field and they knew their land. In the Battle of Lexington and Concord, the main objective for the British was to obtain the colony's weapons and to capture John Adams. On the British's return across the Old North Bridge, the Americans' untrained and angry militia was waiting and successfully defeated the 700 British troops. This surprising victory boosted morale and gave them confidence for the war ahead of them. This battle used hit-and-run tactics because the Americans knew that they could outmatch the British troops who stand in a straight line by doing this. The U.S. overall followed their battle plan, and they won the war in the end because of this. They stuck to defending, utilizing generals, using home field, and fighting the Native American way, and in the end, this won them the war. When they did not stick to their plan, they lost badly, and it did not end up successful. when they stuck to the plan like they wanted to do, they were able to be successful. George Washington and the other leaders of the Revolution were able to keep the U.S. on track, and they eventually won the U.S. its independence. They were similar to the Confederates in the fact that they were underdogs, they had to defend, and they had less of everything before the start of the war. However, the war resulted differently in a win for the U.S. because of their persistence in keeping their battle plans, their will to win, and their good leadership. The South had a different result because of their slightly different situation. The result of the American Revolution was a win for the Americans, even though they were the smaller side in the asymmetric war.
The Civil War was an example of asymmetric warfare. The Confederates were the underdogs against the Union, who had a more established army, unlike the South, which was a brand new one. The South had home field advantage, and this led to their strategy to fight defensively. Fighting defensively was an advantage because the North had to travel down to Southern territory, and this gave the South time to set up their fighting positions. Also, the South had an escape route advantage because if a battle was not going to go their way, they could get out of battles more easily. Robert E. Lee ordered the troops to split into three sections to stop the North in the Battle of Chancellorsville, and the Confederates won this battle. This battle was called Robert E. Lee's most perfect battle because he was home field to his advantage, and they defeated the North. Another way the Confederates used home field advantage was when they fought defensively in Richmond, Virginia. Under the command of McClellan, the Union marched to Richmond to take the capital. McClellan's Union force was bigger than Robert E. Lee's force, and that was defending Richmond, but Lee's force was more skilled. Lee took advantage of McClellan's cautious style, and the Union stalled and retreated back. The Battle of Chancellorsville and 7 Days' Battle was very successful due to the home field advantage. A way that the Confederates were more unsuccessful when they went outside the home field was traveling to Sharpsburg, Maryland. The Confederates wanted to take the capital in hopes of the border states' support, but it backfired on them severely. The Union found a copy of Lee's battle plan wrapped around something in an abandoned rebel campsite, and Lee lost that element of surprise. The Union used home field advantage because they fanned out near Antietam Creek and they attacked the Confederates in 3 stages. This caused the Confederate soldiers to retreat. The Battle of Antietam was an example of how the Confederates were unsuccessful when they went against home field. Another example of when the Confederates were unsuccessful when they went off their home field was the Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg was on June 1863 in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Gettysburg was the bloodiest battle ever fought on U.S. soil and was considered the turning point for the war because this is when the North started to win more of the battles. Another advantage that the South had was that they had a cause. The South had a cause to fight because their rights were being threatened, and all they had to do was hold out longer than the North to avoid defeat. The first Bull Run, 7 Days, Fredericksburg, and Chancellorsville are all battles where the South had avoided defeat. To help the South avoid defeat, they had experienced leaders to help. They had Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee to help guide them in battles. Stonewall Jackson was a Confederate general, and most people considered him one of the most tactical commanders in the war. He received his nickname Stonewall after the First Battle of Bull Run, Second Battle of Bull Run, Fredericksburg, and Antietam. He also managed to have the Confederate Army surround the entire Union troops at Chancellorsville. Unfortunately, Stonewall was shot by his commander Robert E. Lee by accident. Robert E. Lee was the commander of the Confederate Army, and he was just as skilled as Stonewall. One of the battles where he showed his skilled leadership was the Battle of Chancellorsville. The Battle of Chancellorsville was called Lee's most perfect battle because he decided to split up his troops because the Union Army was much greater than theirs. He did this to hope to attack the Union by surprise and win the battle. This battle resulted in a victory for the Confederates, and Lee showed his skilled leadership. Although the Confederates did not win the Civil War, they held on for as long as they could. Using home field advantage, having a cause, and having skilled leaders helped them avoid defeat for almost 2 years, until the Union turned things around at Gettysburg. Overall, the South won most of the first battles in the war, and their advantages and tactics helped them hold on longer than the North anticipated. In the end, the Confederates fell to the Union. The Confederates had strong advantages such as home field, having camouflage, and skilled leaders. They had strong tactics, and even though they did not win, their strong fighting did not go unnoticed. And having skillful tactics can help you while fighting the war. In the American Revolution, the Americans were outnumbered by the British, but the Americans came out strong towards the end and defeated the British and gained their independence. Unlike the American Revolution, the Civil War had a different outcome for the underdogs. The smaller side, which was the Confederates, took the loss after 4 years of fighting and fell to the Union. Although the Confederates held on for as long as they could, the Union defeated them. Both smaller sides had similar tactics such as home field advantage, resourceful and skillful leaders, and good tactics, showing us that the underdog can win sometimes, but other times they're just outfought.